Welcome back to the channel everyone, and a huge warm welcome to all the new viewers who love the thrill of hidden treasure, pocket change miracles, and the unbelievable stories that turn ordinary coins into life-changing fortunes, because today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and talked about mysteries in modern American numismatics. The legendary 1973 quarter dollar that under extraordinary circumstances is believed by collectors to be worth as much as $12 million. A coin that most people would never look at twice, a coin that once rattled around in cash registers, vending machines, and jacket pockets, yet in rare situations becomes the ultimate dream find. And as you watch this story unfold, keep in mind that every detail matters, every tiny flaw, every unusual strike, every metal inconsistency, and every historical accident can transform a common piece of change into something museums want, collectors fight over, and auction houses whisper about, because the 1973 quarter was struck during a time of massive change at the United States Mint, a period when production pressures were intense, quality control systems were pushed to their limits, and experimental processes quietly overlapped with standard minting, creating the perfect storm for errors, anomalies, and mistakes that were never supposed to leave the mint, yet somehow did. And those few survivors are what fuel the $12 million legend today, because while millions of 1,973 quarters were struck in Philadelphia and Denver, almost all were perfectly normal-clad copper-nickel coins, but buried within that mountain of ordinary pieces were a handful of extraordinary outliers, coins that broke the rules of minting physics and accounting, coins that should not exist at all. And the first and most jaw-dropping possibility that drives this valuation is the rumored existence of a 1973 quarter struck on a 90% silver planchet, something that officially should not have happened because silver quarters were discontinued after 1964, yet history has already proven that transitional errors are very real, with 1965 quarters struck on silver planchets and other off-metal errors documented and sold for enormous sums, and in the chaos of early 1970s mint operations, with leftover planchets, experimental blanks, and recycled metal occasionally crossing paths, the possibility of a 1973 quarter struck on a silver planchet becomes not just fantasy but a numismatic nightmare scenario for the mint and a dream for collectors, because such a coin would instantly become unique or nearly unique, combining the wrong metal, the wrong year, and the wrong composition into a single object, and when you add pristine condition, razor-sharp strike, and clear date visibility, the valuation explodes exponentially, especially if metallurgical testing confirms the composition beyond doubt. And then there is the even rarer and more controversial possibility of a 1973 quarter struck on a 40% silver or even a foreign silver planchet intended for another country's coinage, something that has happened before with other denominations, and such an error would not just be rare, it would be historically explosive, rewriting what we know about mint handling procedures of the era. And that alone could justify multi-million-dollar bids from elite collectors who are not just buying a coin but buying a piece of mystery, another powerful factor that pushes the 1973 quarter into legendary territory is the possibility of a full double denomination error, where a quarter is struck over another coin entirely, such as a struck-through foreign coin or even another U.S. denomination, and if the underlying design remains partially visible beneath the Washington quarter design, creating a dramatic layered image, the coin becomes a visual spectacle, the kind of piece that makes seasoned collectors stop breathing for a moment, because double denomination errors are among the most coveted mistakes in numismatics, and when paired with a common year like 1973, the shock value multiplies, because nobody expects greatness from a coin that looks so ordinary at first glance. And then there is the legendary double die phenomenon, which on a 1973 quarter could manifest as extreme doubling on the date, the word liberty, or the motto "In God We Trust." And while minor doubling is common, true hub doubling is rare and dramatic, producing thick, separated, unmistakable secondary images that cannot be dismissed as machine doubling, and a confirmed 1973 double die quarter with massive, clear, textbook doubling in uncirculated condition could alone be worth a fortune. But when combined with other anomalies, such as off-metal composition or experimental strikes, the value compounds into the stratosphere. And speaking of experimental strikes, another possibility whispered among advanced collectors is that during 1973, the mint may have tested Alternative alloys or planchet treatments, producing coins that differ subtly in weight, color, or magnetic properties, and if one of these test strikes escaped into circulation without documentation, it would be nearly impossible to identify without advanced testing, but once proven, it would represent a missing chapter in mint history, the kind of discovery that makes headlines far beyond the coin world. And that alone can push a valuation into 8 figures, because wealthy collectors are not just competing for rarity, they are competing for legacy. And then there are dramatic strike errors, such as extreme off-center strikes where more than half the design is missing yet the date remains fully visible, or broad strikes with wildly expanded diameters that stretch Washington's profile into an eerie distortion. And while many off-center coins exist, those with perfect centering of the date and mint mark are exponentially more valuable, and if a 1973 quarter were discovered with an extreme off-center strike combined with a wrong planchet or double die, it would become a once-in-a-generation discovery. Another factor that fuels the $12 million valuation is condition, because rarity alone is powerful, but rarity in flawless or near-flawless condition is nuclear, and if such an error coin survived decades without heavy circulation wear, retaining original mint luster, sharp details, and minimal contact marks, grading services would fight to certify it, and once slabbed with a top-tier grade and full documentation, the market frenzy would begin, because the highest-end collectors are always chasing the finest known example, and if there is only one, or even two, the price becomes whatever the richest bidder is willing to pay, and that is how ordinary coins become legendary assets. And then we must consider the human element, the stories of coins pulled from change jars, inherited collections, estate sales, or forgotten bank rolls, because provenance adds another layer of allure, and a 1973 quarter discovered in a dramatic, verifiable way only amplifies its mystique. And in the world of ultra-high-end numismatics, mystique equals money, and there is also the possibility of a mint mark anomaly, such as a misplaced, doubled, or missing mint mark where one should exist. And while 1973 quarters do not normally feature mint marks from Philadelphia, Denver issues do, and a wildly misplaced D mint mark, especially one punched over another mark or appearing in an impossible location, would raise immediate red flags and intense interest. And let us not forget the potential for die clashes so severe that ghostly outlines of the reverse appear on the obverse or vice versa, creating haunting images that look almost supernatural. And when such clashes are strong, symmetrical, and paired with other errors, they become centerpieces of elite collections. Another extreme possibility is a wrong design strike, where a quarter is struck with a die intended for another denomination or even another year, creating a mule coin. And mule errors are among the rarest of all mint mistakes, because they require two incompatible dies to be paired and used without detection, and a confirmed 1973 quarter mule would instantly become one of the most important U.S. error coins ever discovered, commanding a price that could easily approach or exceed $12 million, especially if the design mismatch is dramatic and unmistakable. And all of these possibilities are magnified by the sheer number of collectors chasing the dream, because millions of people collect quarters, and the Washington Quarter Series is one of the most widely followed in American numismatics, meaning demand is enormous, and when demand collides with extreme rarity, prices lose all rational limits. And while skeptics argue that such a $12 million 1973 quarter has never been publicly sold, believers counter that many of the most valuable coins in existence were once unknown, hidden away in private collections, vaults, or safety deposit boxes, waiting for the right moment to surface. And history supports that belief, because time and again, coins once thought impossible have emerged, rewritten price guides, and shocked the world. And that is why the hunt never stops, why collectors weigh their coins, examine edges, study details under magnification, and send suspicious pieces for professional testing, because the difference between a face value quarter and a generational fortune can be measured in microns, milligrams, and manufacturing quirks invisible to the untrained eye. And the legend of the $12 million 1973 quarter lives on not just because of what has been proven, but because of what is possible, because numismatics is a field where the past still has secrets. Next, 1980 D quarter dollar coin. Today we are diving into one of the most fascinating modern numismatic legends of all time, the incredible story of the 1980 Washington quarter dollar that under extremely rare circumstances is believed by advanced collectors and error specialists to be worth as much as $11 million, a coin that looks completely ordinary at first glance. A coin millions of people have held, spent, ignored, or tossed into jars without a second thought, yet in the right form becomes a once-in-a-generation discovery. And as we explore this topic together, it is important to understand that this value does not come from age alone, not from silver content like older coins, and not from beauty in the traditional sense, but from a perfect storm of minting errors, transitional mistakes, experimental anomalies, and historical timing that transformed a small number of 1980 Denver minted quarters into objects of extreme rarity and desire, because the year 1980 was a chaotic and transitional period at the United States Mint, a time when production volumes were massive, equipment was aging, quality control was stretched thin, and different metal sources, planchet supplies, and die preparations were often handled simultaneously, creating conditions where mistakes could and did happen. And while the vast majority of 1980 quarters are worth face value today, hidden among them are extraordinary error coins that challenge what we think is possible, and the most powerful and valuable possibility begins with the concept of an off-metal strike, because although by 1980 quarters were officially struck in copper-nickel clad composition, history has proven repeatedly that wrong planchets can slip into the production line, including leftover silver planchets, foreign planchets intended for other countries, or experimental alloy blanks. And if a 1980 quarter were struck on a silver planchet, whether 90% silver or 40% silver, it would immediately become one of the most important modern error coins ever discovered, because silver quarters were supposed to be gone for more than 15 years by that point, and such a coin would represent a massive accounting and procedural failure at the mint, something that collectors pay enormous premiums for, especially when the date is clear, the strike is strong, and the condition is high, and metallurgical testing confirming the composition would send shockwaves through the numismatic community, instantly placing the coin into elite territory where 7- and 8-figure valuations become realistic. And then there is the even rarer and more mysterious possibility of a 1980 quarter struck on a foreign silver planchet, something that has happened before with other U.S. coins, where blanks intended for overseas mints were accidentally fed into U.S. presses, producing coins with incorrect weight, diameter, and metal composition, and such a coin would not only be visually and physically different but historically explosive, because it would prove cross-contamination of minting materials during a period when the mint was under intense pressure to meet circulation demands, and that alone could push the value into the multi-million-dollar range. But the legend of the $11 million 1980 quarter does not rest on metal composition alone, because another major factor is the possibility of an extreme double die error, and while minor doubling is common and often mistaken for true double dies, a genuine hub double die is dramatic, unmistakable, and highly prized. And if a 1980 quarter were discovered with massive doubling on Washington's profile, the date, the word liberty, or the motto "In God We Trust," with clear separation lines visible under magnification, that coin would instantly be elevated into elite status, especially if the doubling is bold and consistent across multiple design elements, and when such a double die appears on a relatively modern coin where collectors expect precision, the shock value alone drives demand through the roof. And then there is the possibility of a double denomination error, where a 1980 quarter is struck over another coin, such as a previously struck foreign coin or even another U.S. denomination, leaving traces of the underlying design visible beneath the Washington quarter image. And these layered hybrid coins are among the most visually striking and historically fascinating errors in numismatics, because they represent multiple minting events colliding into one object. And when such an error occurs on a common circulating coin, the contrast between expectation and reality fuels intense collector interest. And then we must consider the possibility of a mule error, one of the rarest and most valuable types of mint mistakes, where mismatched dies are paired together, such as a quarter obverse combined with an incorrect reverse die or a die intended for another denomination or year. And if a confirmed 1980 quarter mule were discovered, it would immediately become one of the most important modern U.S. coins ever found, because mule errors require multiple levels of failure in die preparation, handling, and press setup, making them extraordinarily rare. and collectors would compete aggressively for ownership, pushing the price into territory that seems unbelievable to casual observers. And another powerful value driver is the possibility of an experimental strike. Because during the late 1970s and early 1980s the mint explored different alloys, planchet treatments, and striking pressures to improve coin durability and reduce costs, and if a small number of experimental planchets were struck with regular dies and accidentally released into circulation without documentation, those coins would be nearly impossible to identify without advanced testing. But once proven, they would represent lost chapters of mint history, and collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums for coins that reveal unknown experiments and forgotten decisions. And then there are dramatic strike errors such as extreme off-center strikes where a large portion of the design is missing yet the date and mint mark remain fully visible, or broad strikes where the coin expands beyond its normal diameter, distorting the design into something almost surreal. And while many off-center and broad strike coins exist, the most valuable examples are those with perfect visual balance, strong strikes, and minimal wear. And when these strike errors are combined with other anomalies like wrong planchets or double dies, their value multiplies exponentially, and condition plays a massive role in this valuation, because rarity is powerful, but rarity in pristine condition is transformative, and if a high-grade 1980D era quarter survived decades with original mint luster, sharp details, and minimal contact marks, grading services would compete to certify it, and once encapsulated with full attribution, the coin would enter a different market entirely, one where wealthy collectors, museums, and investors compete not just on price but on prestige, and provenance adds yet another layer of value, because a dramatic discovery story, such as a coin found in a bank roll, an inherited collection, or a forgotten hoard, adds emotional weight and authenticity that collectors love, and the human stories behind great discoveries often become inseparable from the coins themselves. And there is also the potential for mint mark anomalies, such as a dramatically misplaced D mint mark, a doubled mint mark, or a mint mark punched over another mark. And while mint marks were punched into dies during this era, errors in placement and punching did occur, and extreme examples are highly collectible, especially when they appear on otherwise ordinary coins, and severe die clashes can also add value, where the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, transferring ghostly images that later appear on coins, creating eerie, overlapping designs that fascinate collectors. And when such die clashes are bold and well-defined, they can significantly increase a coin's desirability, and all of these possibilities are amplified by the sheer popularity of the Washington Quarter series, because it is one of the most widely collected and recognized coin types in American history, meaning demand is always strong, and when extreme rarity meets massive demand, prices become limited only by the willingness of the wealthiest collectors to compete. And while skeptics argue that number 1980D quarter has publicly sold for $11 million, believers point out that many of the most valuable coins in existence were unknown, undocumented, or privately held for decades before emerging. And numismatic history is filled with discoveries that were once considered impossible, and that is why collectors continue to search, to weigh their coins, to examine edges, to study details under magnification, and to send suspicious pieces for professional analysis, because the difference between a quarter worth 25 cents and one worth millions can come down to tiny details invisible to the naked eye, and the legend of the $11 million 1980D quarter lives on because it represents the heart of coin collecting itself, the idea that mistakes, accidents, and overlooked details can transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, and that somewhere, whether already discovered or still waiting quietly in a jar or collection, there may exist a coin that challenges everything we think we know about modern money and proves once again that history can hide in the smallest places. Next, 1985D quarter dollar coin. Today we are diving into one of the most fascinating and debated modern numismatic legends of all time, the astonishing story of the 1985D Washington quarter dollar that under extraordinarily rare and specific circumstances is believed by advanced collectors, error specialists, and high-end numismatic investors to be worth as much as $10 million. A coin that on the surface looks completely normal, a coin most people have spent without a second thought, yet in rare forms becomes one of the most mysterious and desirable modern U.S. coins ever imagined, and to understand how this is even possible we need to step back into the mid-1980s, a time when the United States Mint was producing coins at an enormous scale to keep up with circulation demand, using aging machinery, reused dies, high-speed presses, and massive quantities of planchets sourced from multiple suppliers, all while maintaining efficiency over perfection, which is exactly the environment where rare errors, anomalies, and mistakes are born. And while the vast majority of 1985 D quarters struck at the Denver Mint are worth exactly 25 cents today, hidden among the hundreds of millions produced are a tiny number of extreme outliers that challenge the rules of modern minting, and the most powerful and valuable possibility begins with the concept of an off-metal strike. Because although by 1985 quarters were officially composed of copper-nickel clad layers bonded to a pure copper core, history has proven again and again that wrong planchets do escape into production, and if a 1985 D quarter were struck on a silver planchet, whether a leftover 90% silver blank from earlier decades, a 40% silver experimental blank, or even a foreign silver planchet intended for another country's coinage, it would instantly become one of the most important modern era coins ever discovered, because silver quarters were supposed to have vanished from U.S. production more than 20 years earlier, and such a coin would represent a catastrophic breakdown in material control, something collectors pay astronomical premiums for, especially when the date and mint mark are clear, the strike is strong, and metallurgical testing confirms the composition beyond any doubt, and when rarity meets impossibility, price ceilings disappear. And this alone could justify multi-million-dollar valuations, but the legend of the $10 million 1985 D quarter goes far beyond metal composition, because another enormous factor is the possibility of a true double die error, and while machine doubling is common and adds little value, a genuine hub double die is dramatic, unmistakable, and extremely rare, producing bold separation lines and doubled design elements that cannot be denied. And if a 1985 D quarter were discovered with extreme doubling on Washington's portrait, the date, the word liberty, or the motto "In God We Trust," and that doubling was consistent across the coin and verified by top grading services, the collector market would explode with interest, because double dies on modern quarters are few and far between, and when they appear, demand skyrockets, especially if the coin is preserved in high grade. And then there is the breathtaking possibility of a double denomination error, where a 1985 D quarter is struck over another coin entirely, such as a foreign coin or another U.S. denomination, leaving traces of the underlying design visible beneath the Washington quarter design, creating a layered, hybrid coin that tells the story of multiple minting events colliding into one physical object, and such coins are among the most visually striking and historically important errors in numismatics, because they prove that a struck coin re-entered the production line unnoticed, something that should never happen. And when such an error appears on a common modern coin, the shock value alone sends collectors into a frenzy. And even rarer than that is the possibility of a mule error, one of the rarest classes of mint mistakes known, where mismatched dies are paired together, such as a quarter obverse combined with an incorrect reverse die, a die intended for another denomination, or even a die from a different year or design type, and mule errors require multiple layers of failure in die storage, labeling, handling, and press setup, making them extraordinarily rare, and a confirmed 1985 D quarter mule would instantly rank among the most important modern U.S. coins ever found, with collectors willing to pay virtually any price to secure ownership. And another powerful contributor to the $10 million valuation is the possibility of experimental strikes, because during the 1980s the mint quietly tested alternative alloys, bonding techniques, and planchet treatments to improve durability and reduce costs. And if a small batch of experimental planchets were accidentally struck with regular dies and released into circulation without documentation, those coins would represent missing chapters in mint history, and collectors place enormous value on coins that reveal unknown experiments and forgotten decisions, especially when those coins surface decades later against all odds. And then there are dramatic strike errors such as extreme off-center strikes where a large portion of the design is missing yet the date and mint mark remain fully visible, or broad strikes where the coin expands beyond its normal diameter, stretching and distorting the design into something almost surreal. And while many off-center and broad strike coins exist, the most valuable examples are those with perfect visual balance, bold strikes, minimal wear, and strong eye appeal, and when such strike errors are combined with other anomalies like wrong planchets or double dies, their value multiplies exponentially rather than adding incrementally, and condition plays a massive role in pushing a coin into eight-figure territory, because rarity alone is powerful, but rarity preserved in pristine or near-pristine condition is transformative, and if a high-grade 1985D error quarter survived decades with original mint luster, crisp details, and minimal contact marks, grading services would aggressively compete to certify and attribute it, and once encapsulated with full documentation, the coin would enter a different market entirely, one populated by elite collectors, museums, and investors who are not constrained by typical price guides, and provenance adds another powerful layer of value, because coins with compelling discovery stories become legends, whether they were found in a bank roll, inherited collection, estate sale, or forgotten hoard, and the human element of discovery often becomes inseparable from the coin itself, increasing both emotional and financial value. And there is also the possibility of mintmark anomalies, such as a dramatically misplaced D mintmark, a doubled or repunched mintmark, or a mintmark appearing in an impossible location, and because mintmarks during this era were punched into dies by hand, errors did occur, and extreme examples are highly sought after, especially when they appear on otherwise ordinary dates, and severe die clashes can also play a role, where obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, transferring ghostly images that later appear on coins, creating eerie overlapping designs that fascinate collectors, and when such clashes are bold, symmetrical, and well-defined, they can dramatically increase desirability, and all of these possibilities are amplified by the immense popularity of the Washington Quarter series, one of the most widely collected and recognized coin types in American history, meaning demand is always high, and when massive demand meets extreme rarity, prices are limited only by how badly the wealthiest collectors want to win, and while skeptics argue that number 1985D quarter has publicly sold for $10 million, believers point out that many of the most valuable coins in existence were unknown or privately held for decades before emerging, and numismatic history is filled with discoveries that were once dismissed as impossible, and that is why collectors continue to search relentlessly, weighing coins, examining edges, studying details under magnification, and sending suspicious pieces for professional analysis, because the difference between a quarter worth face value and one worth a fortune can come down to tiny details invisible to the naked eye, and the legend of the $10 million 1985D quarter endures because it captures the very soul of coin collecting, the idea that mistakes, accidents, and overlooked details can transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, and that somewhere, whether already discovered or still quietly waiting in a jar, drawer, or collection, there may exist a coin that rewrites what we believe is possible and proves once again that history can hide in the smallest places. Last 1989D quarter dollar. Today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating modern numismatic legends ever discussed, the astonishing and highly debated story of the 1989D Washington quarter dollar that under extremely rare and specific circumstances is believed by advanced collectors, error specialists, and elite numismatic investors to be worth as much as $9 million. A coin that looks completely normal to most people, a coin millions have handled, spent, or ignored without hesitation, yet in rare forms becomes a once-in-a-generation discovery that challenges everything we think we know about modern U.S. coinage, and to understand how such an enormous valuation is even possible we must first understand the historical environment in which the 1989D quarter was produced. Because the late 1980s were a period of relentless production pressure at the United States Mint, especially at the Denver facility, where hundreds of millions of quarters were struck using high-speed presses, long-running dies, and planchets supplied in massive quantities from multiple contractors, all while efficiency often took priority over microscopic perfection, and this exact environment is where rare minting errors, transitional mistakes, and extraordinary anomalies can slip through undetected. And while the overwhelming majority of 1989D quarters are common copper-nickel-clad coins worth face value, hidden among them are theoretical and documented possibilities that could transform a single example into one of the most valuable modern coins in existence, and the most powerful and widely discussed factor behind the $9 million legend begins with the possibility of an off-metal strike, because although by 1989 quarters were officially produced only in copper-nickel-clad composition, numismatic history has repeatedly proven that wrong planchets can and do enter the striking chamber, including leftover silver planchets from earlier decades, experimental blanks, or foreign planchets intended for overseas coinage contracts, and if a 1989 D-quarter were discovered struck on a silver planchet, whether 90% silver, 40% silver, or a foreign silver alloy, it would instantly become one of the most shocking modern-era coins ever discovered. Because silver quarters were never supposed to exist anywhere near U.S. production lines more than 2 decades after their discontinuation, and such a mistake would represent a profound breakdown in material segregation, something collectors prize immensely because it reveals hidden flaws in mint operations, and once metallurgical testing confirmed the composition beyond any doubt, the coin would immediately enter the highest tier of numismatic significance, where multi-million-dollar valuations are not only plausible but expected, and the value climbs even higher if the coin exhibits correct weight anomalies, edge characteristics, and magnetic properties consistent with the wrong metal. And condition plays a massive role here, because a pristine or near-pristine example with full mint luster, sharp strike, and minimal contact marks would attract global attention from collectors and institutions alike, but the legend of the $9 million 1989 D-quarter does not rely solely on metal composition, because another enormous contributor is the possibility of a genuine double die error. And while machine doubling is common and often misunderstood, a true hub double die is rare. Dramatic, and unmistakable, producing bold, separated secondary images that appear consistently across multiple design elements, and if a 1989 D-quarter were discovered with extreme doubling on Washington's portrait, the date, the word liberty, or the motto "In God We Trust," and that doubling was confirmed by top grading services as a true double die rather than mechanical vibration, the coin would instantly become a centerpiece of modern-era collecting, especially because double dies on late 20th century quarters are exceedingly scarce, and when such an error appears on a coin that millions assume to be perfectly manufactured, the shock factor alone drives demand to extraordinary levels, and then there is the breathtaking possibility of a double denomination error, where a 1989 D-quarter is struck over another coin, such as a foreign coin or another U.S. denomination, leaving visible remnants of the underlying design beneath the Washington quarter image, creating a layered and surreal hybrid coin that tells the story of multiple minting events colliding into a single physical object, and these coins are among the most visually striking and historically important errors in numismatics because they prove that a previously struck coin re-entered the production line unnoticed, something that should never happen under standard mint controls. And when such an error appears on a modern circulating coin with clear date and mint mark visibility, collectors compete aggressively, often pushing prices into territory that seems unbelievable to the casual observer, and even rarer than double denomination errors is the possibility of a mule error, one of the most coveted and elusive classes of mint mistakes known, where mismatched dies are paired together, such as a quarter obverse combined with an incorrect reverse die, a die intended for another denomination, or a die from an incompatible design series, and mule errors require multiple layers of failure in die preparation, storage, identification, and press setup, making them extraordinarily rare, and a confirmed 1989 D-quarter mule would instantly rank among the most important modern U.S. coins ever discovered, because it would represent a fundamental collapse of minting protocol, and collectors with the deepest pockets would be willing to pay almost any price to secure such a historically significant piece. And another powerful factor driving the $9 million valuation is the possibility of experimental strikes, because during the late 1980s the U.S. Mint quietly explored alternative alloys, bonding methods, and planchet treatments to improve coin durability, reduce costs, and optimize long-term circulation performance, and if a small batch of experimental planchets were accidentally struck with standard quarter dies and released into circulation without documentation, those coins would represent missing chapters in mint history, and collectors place enormous value on coins that reveal unknown experiments and forgotten decisions, especially when those coins surface decades later with scientific proof, and then there are dramatic strike errors that can elevate a coin's value exponentially, such as extreme off-center strikes where a significant portion of the design is missing yet the full date and mint mark remain visible, or broad strikes where the coin expands beyond its normal diameter, stretching and distorting Washington's profile and the surrounding legends into something almost surreal. And while off-center and broad strike errors are not uncommon in general, the most valuable examples are those with exceptional eye appeal, minimal wear, and perfect placement of key design elements, and when these strike errors are combined with other anomalies like wrong planchets, double dies, or die clashes, their value multiplies rather than merely adding. And condition remains one of the most critical components in pushing a coin toward eight-figure territory, because rarity alone is powerful, but rarity preserved in pristine or near-pristine condition is transformative, and if a high-grade 1989 D-era quarter survived decades with original mint luster, crisp detail, clean surfaces, and minimal bag marks, professional grading services would aggressively pursue certification and attribution, and once encapsulated with full documentation, the coin would enter an entirely different market populated by elite collectors, museums, and long-term investors who are not constrained by typical price guides or conventional valuation logic. And provenance adds yet another layer of value, because coins with compelling discovery stories become legends in their own right, whether they were found in a bankroll, an inherited collection, an estate sale, or a forgotten hoard, and the human narrative behind a discovery often becomes inseparable from the coin itself, increasing both emotional resonance and financial value. And there is also the potential for mintmark anomalies on the 1989 D quarter, such as a dramatically misplaced D mintmark, a doubled or repunched mintmark, or a mintmark appearing in an impossible or undocumented location. And because mintmarks during this era were still punched into dies by hand, errors did occur, and extreme examples are highly sought after, particularly when they appear on otherwise ordinary dates. And severe die clashes can further enhance value, where obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, transferring ghostly outlines that later appear on coins, creating eerie overlapping images that fascinate collectors. And when such die clashes are bold, symmetrical, and well-defined, they can dramatically increase desirability, and all of these possibilities are amplified by the immense popularity of the Washington Quarter series itself, one of the most widely collected and recognized coin types in American history, meaning demand is always strong, and when massive demand collides with extreme rarity, prices become limited only by the willingness of the wealthiest collectors to outbid one another.